According to the song The Most Wonderful Time of the Year, Christmas is apparently a time for scary ghost stories. I don't have anything like that, but I do have something close, so I thought I'd share. This information is important for the public to know regardless, even if a bit upsetting. I'm an officer with the Talbot County Sheriff's Office. You've probably never heard of Talbot County, Georgia, and you sure as hell haven't heard of the small unincorporated community of Box Springs situated in it. Yes, I said community, not town. Box Springs is basically a large expanse of land with a highway running through it. Every so often you'll see a house, a church, nearly always with a graveyard in back, or on rare occasions a Dollar General. We used to have a major attraction though, Christmas Island, an extensive display of Christmas lights and decorations that drew in people practically from all over the state. Christmas Island was put on by a woman by the name of Julia Vardaman. She lived on about 100 acres of land, and I swear to you she covered nearly every inch of it with strings of lights, fake snow, Christmas trees, and life-size figures of nutcrackers, Santa, reindeer, and snowmen. She must have worked damn near year-round setting it all up. Mrs. Vardaman was a hospice nurse, meaning she tended to dying elderly people on a daily basis. Death was already something she was accustomed to, so maybe it was appropriate work. Her husband died 3 months into their marriage. He fell while fixing the roof to their newly built home in Box Springs, sustained an unbelievable head injury, and never woke up from a coma. In her 3 months of marriage, Mrs. Vardaman conceived 3 times, and lost all 3 babies. She basically withdrew from everyone and everything after that. The few people who knew her reported she was very religious up until these tragedies, and apparently lost her faith in God. But then the first Christmas following her husband's death came, and she all of a sudden unveiled to us a holiday wonderland like none we'd ever seen. Perhaps it was her way of finding joy in her sad life. Perhaps she was lonely and just wanted a reason for people to come and see her. Regardless, Christmas Island, as she called it, sure as hell brought with it joy and togetherness. Word spread fast, and by its second Christmas in operation, probably the whole damn state showed up, putting Box Springs on the map if only for a short time. Everything turned sour when that young man disappeared. 19-year-old Dustin Tidwell attended the Christmas Island festivities the third Christmas they were held, and by the end of the night he'd vanished into thin air. No one saw him leave. He didn't drive there. He'd come with his parents, who were hysterical when they discovered he was inexplicably just gone. When did you last see Dustin on that night? I asked Mrs. Vardaman when I paid her my first visit. I just remember that he was in the kitchen most of the night, she told me in a quiet voice. The last time I saw him, he was leaving the house to go look at the lights some more with his family. The kitchen, I asked. So you host people indoors during the event? Oh yes, she said. Yes, I always allow people inside to get off their feet and enjoy some cookies and hot cocoa. I see, I said as I was inspecting every corner of the kitchen. And you're sure you saw him leave the house? Positive. She chuckled. For an instant, her usual melancholy expression vanished. You don't think he somehow trapped himself in the oven, do you? You're welcome to look. I grinned at her dark joke in spite of myself. No, Mrs. Vardaman, I said. I highly doubt that's necessary. I gave the house one last look over. Nothing about any of the rooms looked unusual. It was a basic and modest home, save for a red Persian rug with intricate patterns placed in the center of the bedroom floor. But this was hardly suspicious. Perhaps Mrs. Vardaman liked spoiling herself with luxury items every now and then. Hell, she deserved it after all she'd been through. I went on to survey the land, but I couldn't turn up any clues. As I was driving away, I was suddenly struck by a thought. The whole 100 or so acres was entirely clear of lights and decorations, and it had been only a few days after Christmas. Where did she store it all? I saw no signs of an attic or basement or storage shed of any kind. It puzzled me, but I didn't think too much about it as I continued my investigation. The search for Dustin went on for a year, and then the next Christmas rolled around. Mrs. Vardaman put on Christmas Island as if nothing had transpired last year. People familiar with Dustin Tidwell's disappearance were hesitant to attend. A dark cloud now suddenly hovered over Christmas Island. But in the end, the Box Springs community decided continuing the tradition of the event would be what Dustin would want. The turnout was lower this year, but the Vardaman land was still plenty crowded, with a number of people coming from outside Box Springs. I was assigned to oversee everything this time, as an extra precaution, just in case anything happened. Something did. A girl by the name of Candace Prescott, aged 15, spilled hot cocoa all over herself when a boy snuck up behind her and scared her as she was sitting in the grass admiring the lights covering Mrs. Vardaman's house. The way she cried, the drink must have been unusually scalding. Mrs. Vardaman, who'd been in the kitchen, heard Candace scream and rushed out immediately to help her. Though a childless woman, Mrs. Vardaman was known by everyone to have a motherly nature, and being a hospice nurse, she certainly knew how to care for others. Candace's parents had Candace's crying infant brother to deal with, so they allowed Mrs. Vardaman to help Candace clean up. "And you left her in the bathroom?" I asked Mrs. Vardaman on my second visit. "Yes," she confessed, sounding burdened with guilt. "I should have known the cocoa was too hot. I had a feeling it would be, but I decided it would be fine. I was wrong. Oh, so wrong. The poor dear looked like she had burns, and she wouldn't stop crying. So I went to get her some ice from the kitchen and... Here, Mrs. Vardaman broke down and started to cry. "It isn't your fault," I told her gently. I didn't think it was. But still, I was disturbed. Another mysterious disappearance at Christmas Island. What was going on? The bathroom was down the hall past the kitchen and living room, and at the end of the hall was the bedroom. The house was full of people the night of the disappearance, both from Box Springs and elsewhere. Anyone could have snatched Candace. Absolutely anyone. But why? I couldn't figure it out. Now, it's Christmas again, and it's safe to say Christmas Island is off this year. The only reason why is because Mrs. Vardaman isn't here to host it anymore. No one knows where she is. She left her house abandoned. Christmas is a couple of weeks away, and I wonder if Mrs. Vardaman plans to return to her house once she finds what she's looking for. We figured out where she kept all those decorations, by the way. Examining the Persian rug in the bedroom again, I got a weird feeling about it. I moved it, and after looking closely, me and two other officers found a trapdoor underneath. Opening it, we found a staircase that led down to a secret chamber. The inside of it had an unspeakably foul smell that nearly made us vomit. We found a light switch, but upon flipping it, we discovered the light bulbs hanging from the ceiling provided little light. Nonetheless, we trudged forward, finding ourselves navigating a labyrinth of Christmas trees and other decorations thrown haphazardly here and there. We passed by fallen nutcrackers, gingerbread men, and other figures staring up at us with eyes that looked hopeless and almost insane. We tripped once or twice over discarded strings of Christmas lights, as if they were booby traps. Amid the messy piles of decorations, there stood one display that was perfectly put together. Mrs. Vardaman put more care into it than any of the displays she showed to the public. It seemed we found the source of the chamber's foul smell. It was a nativity scene. She never had one at Christmas Island. Some say this was because she'd lost her faith, but maybe she hadn't. Maybe her faith was private to her, and that's why she kept her nativity hidden. She'd used Dustin as her Joseph, and Candace as her Mary. Their bloated, decaying bodies were propped up against two wooden chairs, dressed in neatly pressed biblical costumes straight out of a Christmas pageant. An empty, pristine manger full of fresh hay sat before them. In front of the manger was a goat whose throat looked slit. It had a fresh pool of blood next to it, It probably was the most recent addition. Surrounding Mary, Joseph, and the goat were 3 wooden stakes in the ground, and tied around those stakes were the 3 wise men. It took us a while to identify them. There was so little of them left. Parts of them were falling off. Soon, there'd be nothing left but their regal, gold-fringed wise men robes adorning those stakes. We eventually did find out who they were, though, by the names on their gravestones. Mrs. Vardaman had witnessed many people she cared for at hospice die. People she grew to love, they say. It's also said she attended all of their burials. Kind soul that she was. And if the disturbed graves we found, presumably of the 3 men on the stakes, were any indication, she dug some of her patients back out of the ground under the cover of night to see them again and use them for her nativity scene. The little graveyards behind churches out here are unguarded. No one noticed her. Talking to more people who knew the Vardamans, we discovered that the chamber was in fact Doomsday's shelter, built by the very religious Mr. Vardaman, who believed the second coming was at hand, perhaps to get closer to God and away from her misery. Mrs. Vardaman was trying to hasten the second coming, which her late husband had always dutifully waited for. Her little nativity scene that she made just for herself was missing only one thing: a baby Jesus. Pray that we catch her before she returns with one to complete her display.